The blood in the snow told a story no one wanted to hear. When Rowan Hale pulled the woman from the frozen creek that February night, her bruised face and torn dress screamed a truth the valley below had buried for years. 7 winters he'd lived alone on that mountain, hiding from the world. But some things won't stay hidden. Some silences demand to be broken. This is the story of what happens when a ghost asks one simple question, and an entire town's sins come crashing down. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The wind that night sounded like wolves. Rowan Hale stood at the single window of his cabin, watching pine branches whip against a sky gone the color of old iron. February in the high country meant storms that could bury a man in his sleep, turn familiar trails into white graves. He'd learned that lesson years ago, same way he'd learned most things worth knowing, through pain and survival. The fire behind him crackled, throwing shadows across walls he'd stopped seeing. 7 years. That's how long it had been since he'd spoken to anyone beyond the occasional supply run down to Miller's trading post. 7 years since the war had spit him out, broken and hollow. 7 years since he'd climbed this mountain looking for silence and found it, thick and heavy as the snowfall outside. He turned from the window, reaching for the coffee pot. That's when he heard it. Not the wind. Something else. Something that made the hair on his neck stand straight. A scream, distant, barely there. But human. Definitely human. Rowan froze, coffee forgotten. His hand moved instinctively to his side, where a service pistol had once hung. Empty air now. He'd left that life behind, or tried to. But some instincts don't die. They just wait, coiled and patient. Another sound, closer this time. Not a scream, but something worse. The wet, desperate gasping of someone drowning in cold. He moved without thinking, grabbing his heavy coat and the oil lamp. The door fought him when he yanked it open, wind slamming it back against the frame. Snow stung his face like thrown gravel. Visibility was maybe 10 feet, the world beyond that just white static. Stupid, he muttered, stepping into the storm. Probably just an animal. But he kept moving. The creek ran 30 yards from his cabin, swollen with snowmelt even in winter. He knew every rock and turn of it, had walked it in darkness and daylight both. His boots punched through the snow's crust with each step, powder filling them, melting against his wool socks. The cold was absolute, the kind that made your bones ache. The lamp's circle of light picked out shapes, tree trunk, boulder, fence post from some long-dead homestead. Then something else. Something that didn't belong. Dark fabric against white snow. Movement, weak and erratic. Rowan broke into a run, awkward in the deep powder. His breath came in harsh clouds. The creek's roar grew louder, mixing with his pulse. When he reached the bank, he had to set the lamp down, hands shaking, not from cold. She was half in the water, half out, one arm hooked over a fallen log that probably saved her life. Her dress, what remained of it, was dark, soaked through. Her skin had gone the color of old newspaper. And her face. Rowan had seen violence before. Hell, he'd dealt it out, back when he wore a uniform and believed in causes. But this was different. This was deliberate. The bruising around her throat, the split lip, the way her dress was torn, not by branches or rocks, by hands. Jesus, he breathed, the first prayer he'd spoken in 7 years. He didn't waste time on questions. The creek would kill her in minutes if the cold didn't. He waded in, gasping as the water hit his legs, soaking through his pants. The current pulled at him, trying to take his feet. He reached her, got his arms under her shoulders. She made a sound, weak, animal. Her eyes fluttered but didn't open. "I've got you," Rowan said, surprised by his own voice. It sounded foreign after so much silence. "Hold on." She weighed almost nothing. The water had done some of the work for him, numbing her, making her limp. He pulled her free of the creek and lifted her, cradling her against his chest. Her head lolled against his shoulder. She was breathing, barely, shivering violently. That was good. Shivering meant her body was still fighting. The trip back to the cabin took forever and no time at all. The storm seemed to intensify, as if angry he'd stolen something from it. Snow filled his eyes, his nose, worked its way down his collar. His arms burned from her weight. His legs threatened to buckle with each step. But he didn't stop. The cabin's warmth hit him like a wall when he shouldered through the door. He kicked it shut behind him, staggered to the bed, his bed, the only one. and laid her down as gently as he could. Her lips were blue. Her teeth chattered so hard he could hear them clicking. Ice crystals clung to her hair, her eyelashes. Rowan moved fast, years of field training taking over. First, get her out of the wet clothes. He grabbed his hunting knife, cut the dress away. Didn't let himself think about what he was seeing, the bruises that mapped her ribs, the scratches on her arms and legs. Just focused on the task. Blankets. All of them. He piled every wool blanket he owned on top of her, then added his own body heat, lying beside her fully clothed, letting his warmth transfer. Her shivering gradually slowed. Color crept back into her lips, replacing that deathly blue. Rowan stared at the ceiling beams, feeling her breath against his neck, feeling the wrongness of the situation settle over him like a weight. Someone had done this. Someone had hurt her, stripped her, left her to die in a storm, and they'd expected the mountain to finish what they started. Hours passed. The storm raged outside. The fire burned low. Rowan fed it without moving from the bed, tossing split logs from the pile he kept nearby. The woman, girl, really, couldn't be more than 25, drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling words he couldn't make out. Once she screamed, a raw, terrified sound that jerked her upright. Her eyes were open, but seeing something else, somewhere else. Rowan caught her shoulders, careful of the bruises. "You're safe," he said. "You're safe now." She stared at him, through him. Then her eyes rolled back and she collapsed. Dawn came gray and bitter. The storm had passed, leaving everything buried under 3 feet of fresh powder. Rowan finally allowed himself to move from the bed, his muscles cramping from staying in one position so long. The woman slept on, her breathing steady now. Better. He built up the fire, put coffee on, made Johnny cakes from his dwindling cornmeal supply, ate standing up, watching her, trying not to think about what came next. She woke around noon. One moment she was sleeping, the next her eyes were open, wide and dark, and filled with an animal fear that made Rowan's chest tight. "Easy," he said, staying by the fire, giving her space. "You're in my cabin. Found you in the creek last night. You were dying." She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at him with those huge eyes. "My name's Rowan Hale," he continued, keeping his voice level, calm. "I'm not going to hurt you, but you're hurt already, pretty badly. Do you remember what happened?" Her mouth opened, closed. Her hand went to her throat, touched the bruises there. Her eyes filled with tears that spilled over, tracking down her temples into her hair. "Okay," Rowan said quietly. "Okay. You don't have to talk. Not yet." He brought her water. She drank it greedily, choking a little. He helped her sit up, propped against the wall. She pulled the blankets tight around herself, realizing she was naked beneath them. "Had to cut your dress off," Rowan explained. "You were soaked through. Hypothermic. I have a spare shirt. Pants might be too big, but who are you?" Her voice was barely a whisper, raw and damaged. "Told you. Rowan Hale. I live here. Alone." "Where is here?" "Mountain, about 15 miles above Copper Valley." "You know it?" Something flickered across her face. Fear, deep and primal. "You're from the valley," Rowan said. Not a question. She looked away. He fetched the spare clothes, set them beside the bed, turned his back while she struggled into them. When he looked again, she was drowning in his flannel shirt, the sleeves hanging past her hands. The pants she'd cinched with a belt, rolling the legs up. She looked young, vulnerable, broken, and angry. Beneath the fear, Rowan saw rage simmering. "You got a name or what?" he asked. Long pause. Then, "Leanne." "Leanne." He nodded. "That your real name?" "Does it matter?" "I suppose not." He poured coffee, offered her a cup. She took it with shaking hands, breathed the steam. "You hungry?" "No." "You should eat anyway. I don't want your food." Her voice cracked. "I don't want anything. I just want—" She stopped, put the coffee down, buried her face in her hands. Rowan waited. He was good at waiting. 7 years of silence had taught him patience. When she finally looked up, her face was hard. set. You asked what happened, she said. You want to know? Only if you want to tell me. I don't want to tell anyone, ever. But you pulled me out of that creek. You didn't have to do that. You could have let the mountain take me. So I guess I owe you the truth. Rowan pulled a chair over, sat, gave her his full attention. Leon's hands twisted in the blanket. There were 4 of them, she started. 4 men. I worked at the hotel in Copper Valley, the nice one, on Main Street. I was a maid there, cleaning rooms, changing sheets, honest work. She laughed, bitter. One of the guests, he was older, rich, always smiling, always polite. He asked if I'd bring extra towels to his room, late after my shift, said he'd tip well. Rowan's jaw tightened. He knew where this was going. I was stupid, Leanne continued. I needed the money, my mother's sick, and the medicine costs. It doesn't matter. I went, and he wasn't alone. 3 other men were there, all of them. Important. One was the mayor's son. Another owned half the businesses in town. The third was, I don't know, but they all knew each other. They'd planned it. Her voice had gone flat, mechanical, like she was reading from a report. They locked the door. I tried to scream, but one of them, the mayor's son, he put his hand over my mouth, told me to be quiet, told me if I made noise things would get worse. Rowan's hands clenched into fists. They took turns, Leanne said simply. When they were done, they argued about what to do with me. The rich one said to pay me off, give me money to keep quiet. But the mayor's son said that wouldn't work, said I'd talk eventually, said they needed to make sure I couldn't talk. She touched her throat again. They drove me up the mountain road, as far as they could go before the snow got too deep. Then they made me walk. In just my dress, no coat, no shoes. They followed in the truck, headlights on, like it was a game, like I was an animal they were hunting. Rowan felt something cold and familiar settling in his chest, something he'd thought he'd left behind with his uniform. I ran, Leanne said. I didn't know where, just away. The storm was starting. They kept following, laughing, taking shots at me with a pistol. Not trying to hit me, just keeping me running, scaring me. Eventually the truck couldn't follow anymore, too much snow, but I could hear them behind me, calling my name, telling me there was nowhere to go, that the mountain would kill me for them. She met Rowan's eyes. I believed them, so I jumped into the creek, figured drowning was better than freezing, better than letting them catch me again. Silence filled the cabin. Outside, a crow called, harsh and lonely. Rowan stood slowly, walked to the window, stared out at the white world, seeing nothing. You know their names, he said. Not a question. Yes. All of them. Yes. And if you go back down there, to the valley, to the sheriff, what happens? Leanne laughed, the sound sharp and broken. The sheriff is Thomas Boone. His son Elias is the deputy. Good men, everyone says. Honest. But the mayor? That's Richard Hollis. His son Marcus is one of the 4. And the rich man who started it? That's James Brennan. He owns the copper mine, the smelter, half the land around the valley. He practically owns the town. So the sheriff won't help. The sheriff can't help, even if he wanted to, which he won't, because his job depends on men like Brennan. His son's future depends on staying friendly with Marcus Hollis. That's how it works down there. That's how it's always worked. Rowan turned to face her. Who did this to you? He asked quietly. Leanne blinked, confused. I just told you. No, I want you to say their names, all of them, out loud. Something shifted in her expression. Understanding. James Brennan, she said, her voice gaining strength. Marcus Hollis. William Gates. He runs the lumber mill. And the 4th, I didn't know him, but the others called him Danny. Danny what? I don't know, but he had a scar. Here. She touched her left cheek, and a tattoo on his hand, a star. Rowan nodded slowly, filing it away. What are you going to do? Leanne asked. Me? Nothing, not my business. She stared at him. You asked their names. You needed to say them. That's different from me doing something about it. But you're safe here, Rowan cut her off. Storm's over, but there's more coming. Always is this time of year. You can stay until spring if you want. I've got supplies. It'll be tight, but we'll manage. I don't understand. You don't even know me. Don't need to know you to know what happened to you is wrong. He moved to the stove, started heating water for stew. But I'm not a hero, Leanne. I'm just a man who lives on a mountain. I pulled you out of a creek because that's what you do when you find someone dying. Doesn't mean I'm going to ride down there with a gun and demand justice. Why not? The question hung in the air. Rowan didn't answer for a long time. When he did, his voice was distant. Because I've done that before. Believed in justice, in right and wrong. Rode into places with a gun and righteousness, thinking I could fix things. And you know what I learned? He looked at her. Justice is just another word for revenge. And revenge doesn't fix anything. It just makes more bodies. Leanne's eyes filled with tears again, but she blinked them back, angry now. So that's it? They get away with it? They go back to their lives, their families, and I just... What? Hide on a mountain forever? You do what you need to survive, same as everyone. That's not surviving. That's just existing. Sometimes that's enough. She stood then, shaky but determined. The blankets fell away. She looked small in his oversized clothes, but her spine was straight. You're wrong, she said. Sometimes existing isn't enough. Sometimes you have to fight, even if you lose. Rowan turned back to the stove. Fighting's easier than living with what comes after. Trust me on that. I don't trust you. I don't trust anyone. Smart. She made a frustrated sound, then winced, hand going to her ribs. Rowan moved instinctively to help, but she waved him off. I'm fine. You're not fine. You've got cracked ribs at least. Maybe worse. Should probably get a doctor. No doctors, no one from the valley, ever. Then you're stuck with me playing nurse, and I'm not gentle. Despite everything, the corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. They fell into an uneasy routine over the following days. Rowan kept busy with the endless work of staying alive in winter, chopping wood, checking his snares, maintaining the cabin. Leanne healed slowly, sleeping most of the first week, then gradually moving around more. She didn't talk much. Neither did he. But sometimes in the evenings, with the fire crackling and the wind howling outside, she'd ask questions. Why do you live up here? Quiet. That's it? That's enough. Were you in the war? Long pause. Yes. Which side? Does it matter? War's war. People die either way. You kill anyone? Rowan looked at her. Yes? She nodded, satisfied with his honesty. Another night. You ever married? Once, long time ago. What happened? She died. Fever, while I was overseas. I'm sorry. Me too. Is that why you came up here? Part of it. What's the other part? He didn't answer that one. 2 weeks in, a Chinook blew through, warming the air enough to melt some of the snow. Rowan went out to check his traps, found them empty. He was resetting the third one when he saw the tracks. Boot prints, fresh, leading up from the valley. Multiple sets. His blood went cold. He followed them carefully, rifle in hand. They led to a clearing about a quarter-mile from his cabin, then stopped. Like whoever made them had stood there for a while, looking around. Then they turned back, heading down the mountain. Rowan studied the tracks. 4 sets, 4 men. They were looking for her. He got back to the cabin to find Leanne outside, hanging wet clothes on the line he'd strung between 2 trees. She'd washed them in melted snow, scrubbing them against a rock. Her hands were red from the cold water. We need to talk, Rowan said. She looked up, saw his expression. What's wrong? Someone was up here. 4 men. They didn't find the cabin, but they were close. All color drained from her face. Hey! He caught her arm as she swayed. Breathe. You're okay. They're gone. They're looking for me. Seems like. I should go. I shouldn't have stayed this long. I'm putting you in danger. Stop. His voice was sharp. You're not going anywhere, not in your condition, and not with them hunting. But I said no. They stared at each other. Finally, Leanne looked away. This is why you left the world behind, isn't it? She said quietly. This kind of thing. This mess. Rowan didn't answer. That night, he sat by the window with his rifle, watching the tree line. Leanne pretended to sleep, but he could tell she was awake by her breathing. "Rowan?" she said eventually. "Yeah, that question you asked when I first woke up, about who did this to me." "What about it?" "Why did you ask? If you weren't planning to do anything about it?" He was quiet for a long time. "Because someone needed to ask," he said finally. "Someone needed to hear it, even if I can't fix it." "Can't or won't?" "Both. Neither. I don't know anymore." More silence. Then Leanne said, "My real name's not Leanne. It's Sarah. Sarah Chen." Rowan looked over at her. She was sitting up now, hugging her knees. "My mother came from China," Sarah continued. "Married my father, who was white. Most people in the valley don't like that. Mixed blood, they call me. Yellow on the inside. Not quite white, not quite Chinese, not quite anything. People are idiots. Yeah, but idiots with power are dangerous. Oh, that's true enough. Is that why they—" She stopped, started again. "The things they said while they were— One of them called me a slant-eyed whore. Said I should be grateful for the attention. Said women like me were made for this." Rowan's hands tightened on the rifle. "I want them to hurt," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I want them to feel what I felt. I want them afraid and cold and broken. Is that wrong?" "No." "Then why won't you help me?" "I didn't say I wouldn't help you." She looked at him sharply. Rowan sighed, set the rifle down, rubbed his face. "There's different kinds of help," he said. "You want revenge. I can't give you that, not directly. But maybe there's other ways to make things right." "Like what?" "I don't know yet, but the valley's a small place. Men like that, they think they're untouchable because no one ever touches them. Maybe all it takes is one person refusing to look away." "One person can't change anything." "No, but one person can start something. Tip the first domino. Rest falls on its own." Sarah studied him in the firelight. "You're different than you pretend to be," she said. "How's that?" "You act like you don't care, like you're done with the world. But you're still angry. I can see it." Rowan turned back to the window. Being angry and doing something about it are different things. Maybe they don't have to be. He didn't respond to that. But later, after Sarah had finally fallen asleep, Rowan sat in the dark and thought about 4 men hunting a woman through a storm. Thought about power and silence. Thought about the weight of doing nothing. And for the first time in 7 years, he started to wonder if silence was really the answer after all. Morning brought fresh snow, and with it, a decision Rowan didn't know he'd made until he was already moving. He woke Sarah early. "Get dressed, warm as you can." "Why? What's happening?" "We're going down to the valley." She stared at him. "What? You said—" "I know what I said. Changed my mind. But we're not going for revenge. We're going for information." "Information about what?" "About who these men really are. What they've done before. Because I guarantee you, Sarah, you weren't the first. Men like that don't start with something this bad. They work up to it." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You're going to expose them." "I'm going to find out if there's anything worth exposing. Big difference. Now get ready. We've got a long walk ahead." The descent took 3 hours through snow-choked trails. Rowan kept them off the main road, using old logging paths he'd memorized. Sarah struggled to keep up. She was still healing, but she never complained. Just put one foot in front of the other, her face set with determination. They reached Miller's trading post around noon. Old Man Miller was behind the counter, same as always, sorting through his stock. "Well, I'll be damned," he said when he saw Rowan. "Thought you'd frozen to death up there. Haven't seen you since— October? November. Need to trade. What have you got?" Rowan set down his pack, pulled out furs, good ones, marten and fox, properly cured. Miller examined them with a practiced eye. "These'll do. What do you need?" "Information." Miller's eyebrows rose. "Since when do you care about Valley gossip?" "Since now." "What do you hear about James Brennan?" The old man's expression shuddered. Why are you asking? Just curious. Don't believe that for a second, but he glanced at Sarah, who'd stayed by the door, hood up. Let's just say Brennan's the kind of man who takes what he wants, whether it's land, business, or other things. Other things? I'm too old to spell it out for you, Hale. Use your imagination. Anyone ever complain? Officially? Not officially, no. Few girls left town over the years, left sudden, without saying goodbye. That tell you what you need to know? Rowan's jaw tightened. What about Marcus Hollis? Mayor's son? Apple doesn't fall far from that tree. Rich boy who thinks the rules don't apply. Got a mean streak when he drinks. William Gates? Lumberman, quiet type, but I've heard stories, nothing proven. And someone called Danny has a scar on his face, star tattoo on his hand. Miller went pale. Actually pale. You don't want to mess with Danny Cortez, he said quietly. That man's got connections. Run security for Brennan, but everyone knows what that really means. Muscle, clean up, making problems disappear. Disappear how? However they need to disappear, permanently, if necessary. Sarah had moved closer, listening. Miller noticed her for the first time, really looked at her. His eyes widened. Holy hell, you're the Chen girl, the one who went missing. Sarah said nothing. Miller looked between her and Rowan. Son, whatever you're planning, not planning anything, just asking questions. Questions like that get people hurt, or worse. Good thing I live on a mountain, then. They left with supplies and more information than Rowan had expected. The ride back up was quiet, both of them processing what they'd learned. He's right, Sarah said eventually. This is dangerous. Yep. You could still walk away. Forget you ever found me. Could, won't. Why not? Rowan stopped, turned to face her. Because 7 years ago I came up that mountain to hide. From the world, from my past, from myself. I told myself I was done caring about things. Done fighting. But you know what? That was just another kind of cowardice. He started walking again. You asked who did this to you, and I heard the answer. Can't unhear it. Can't unknow it. And maybe I can't fix it. Maybe I can't give you justice. But I can damn sure make sure those men know someone's watching. Someone knows. Someone remembers. Sarah smiled for the first time since he'd found her. You're a better man than you think you are. Rowan Hale. Don't bet on it. But something had shifted in both of them. The mountain man who wanted silence had found his voice again. And the broken woman who'd wanted to die had found a reason to live. It wasn't justice, not yet, maybe not ever. But it was a start. The first strike came 3 days later, and it wasn't a strike at all, just a missing shipment. James Brennan stood in his warehouse, staring at empty pallets where 2 tons of copper wire should have been. His foreman, a nervous man named Peters, shuffled his feet and avoided eye contact. I don't understand it, Mr. Brennan. The manifest says it arrived Tuesday. Signed for and everything. But when we went to load it this morning, it grew legs and walked off. Brennan's voice was ice. No, sir. I mean, someone must have taken it. But the locks weren't broken. No signs of forced entry. It's like it just vanished. Brennan turned slowly, his eyes cold. 2 tons of wire doesn't vanish, Peters. Someone stole it. Find out who. But Peters wouldn't find anything, because 2 tons of copper wire was currently buried under 6 feet of snow in 3 different locations across the mountain, placed there by a man who knew every hidden cave and forgotten mine shaft in the territory. Rowan had spent 2 nights hauling it up piece by piece, using a handcart and sheer stubbornness. His back screamed, his hands were raw, but every coil of wire he buried felt like a small weight lifting from his chest. Sarah had wanted to help, but he'd refused. You're still healing, he'd said. And if something goes wrong, if someone sees us, you need to be far away from it. That's not fair. This is my fight. No, this is just me moving some wire. Your fight comes later. She'd glared at him but stayed at the cabin, watching from the window as he disappeared into the darkness, pack loaded, returning hours later exhausted and silent. Now, 3 days after the theft, they sat by the fire while Rowan cleaned his rifle. Sarah was mending one of his shirts, needle moving in careful stitches. How long before they realize it's not random? she asked. They already know it is not random. Question is whether they connect it to you. And if they do, then we adjust. She set the shirt down. You make it sound simple. It is simple. They hurt you. Now they hurt back, just slower, quieter. That's not justice. No, it's pressure. Justice comes later, if it comes at all. The second incident happened a week after the first. Marcus Hollis woke to find his prize stallion gone from the stable, the gate standing open. The horse was found 3 days later, 20 miles north, healthy and unharmed, grazing in a meadow like nothing had happened. Cost Hollis $500 in recovery fees and made him look like an idiot who couldn't secure his own property. Small thing, petty even. But it got people talking. Then William Gates's lumber mill had an accident. Nothing dangerous, just the main saw's drive belt snapping at the start of a shift. Replacement took 4 days to arrive from Denver. 4 days of lost production, contracts delayed, workers standing idle. The belt had been nearly new, shouldn't have snapped, but someone had filed it almost through in 3 places, weakening it just enough. Danny Cortez was harder. The man was careful, paranoid even. He lived in a boarding house in town, kept irregular hours, and was always armed. But everyone has patterns if you watch long enough. Rowan watched. He spent a week observing Cortez from various vantage points, learning his routines. Thursday nights, the man drank at the Red Cat Saloon until midnight. Then he'd walk home, taking the alley behind the hardware store because it was faster. On the third Thursday, Rowan was waiting in that alley. He didn't confront Cortez, didn't say a word, just stood there in the shadows, visible enough to be seen but not clearly. When Cortez reached for his gun, Rowan was already gone, melted back into the darkness. But Cortez had seen him, seen the shape of a man watching, waiting. That was enough. The next day, Cortez told Brennan someone was following him. Brennan dismissed it as paranoia. But Rowan saw the way Cortez started checking over his shoulder, the way his hand stayed near his pistol, even in crowded spaces. Fear was useful. It made people sloppy. Back at the cabin, Sarah was changing too. The broken woman Rowan had pulled from the creek was hardening into something else. She still had nightmares. He'd wake to hear her gasping in the dark, reliving it. But during the day she was focused, determined. She'd started asking Rowan to teach her things. Show me how to shoot. He'd looked up from the snare he was building. Why? Because I need to know. Knowing how to shoot doesn't fix anything. Neither does stealing wire. But you did it anyway. Fair point, so he taught her. Started with basic safety, then moved to stance and grip. His old service pistol felt huge in her hands, but she learned fast. Didn't flinch at the recoil, just adjusted and fired again. You're a natural, he said after her 5th session. My father used to hunt. Taught me when I was young, before he died. You never mentioned him. You never asked. They practiced in a clearing a mile from the cabin, far enough that the shots wouldn't carry to the valley. Sarah improved daily. By the end of the 2nd week, she could hit a tin can at 30 yards more often than not. But it was the other lessons she asked for that surprised him. Teach me to move quietly, like you do. That takes years. Then start teaching me now. So he did. Showed her how to place her feet, how to distribute weight, how to use natural cover. She was clumsy at first, snapping twigs and sliding on patches of ice. But she kept trying. Why does this matter? Rowan asked one afternoon, watching her attempt to cross a stretch of dry leaves without sound. Because I was helpless before. Never again. Something in her voice made his chest tight. They never talked about that night, about what had been done to her. It sat between them like a third presence, acknowledged but unspoken. Sometimes Rowan would catch her staring into the fire, her face blank, and know she was back there, back in that hotel room. Other times she'd laugh at something, a squirrel stealing food from the porch, or Rowan cursing when he spilled coffee, and the sound was so unexpected, so genuine, that it stopped him cold. She was surviving, adapting, becoming. Down in Copper Valley, the incidents continued, subtle, persistent. A water line to Brennan's house froze and burst, flooding his basement. Strange, considering every other house on the street was fine. Hollis's car developed engine trouble. The mechanic found sugar in the gas tank. Gates woke to find his supply shed's lock picked. Nothing stolen, but everything rearranged. Tools in wrong places. Lumber stacks reorganized. A message without words. I was here. I can reach you. Cortez's boarding house room was broken into while he was out. Nothing taken. But his belongings had been searched, carefully, professionally. He could tell because tiny markers he'd left, a hair across a drawer, a matchstick and a hinge, were disturbed. Someone was sending a message. Someone new. The four men met in Brennan's study on a cold February night. Firelight threw shadows across their faces as they sat in leather chairs, drinking whiskey that cost more than most Valley families made in a month. "This is getting ridiculous," Gates said. "First my mill, now this? Someone's targeting us." "You think?" Hollis's voice dripped sarcasm. "What gave it away?" "Shut up, Marcus." Brennan set his glass down. "Danny, you said someone's watching you." Cortez nodded, his scar catching the light. "Been following me for weeks, staying just out of sight, professional work." "Could it be the law? Someone from Denver?" "For what? We haven't done anything." Hollis laughed. "Officially." "The girl," Gates said quietly. The room went silent. "What about her?" Brennan's voice was dangerous. "We never found her. Never confirmed. The mountain took care of her," Hollis interrupted. "We made sure of that." "Did we?" Gates leaned forward. "Or did someone find her first?" Cortez stood, walked to the window. "There's a man lives up there, hermit type, been there for years." "So?" "So maybe he's not as isolated as we thought." Brennan considered this. "You think one mountain man is causing all this trouble?" "I think someone is. And I think we need to find out who before it gets worse." "How much worse can it get?" Hollis drained his glass. "Some stolen wire, a missing horse. That's nothing." "It's not nothing," Brennan said coldly. "It's a pattern. Someone's playing games. Making us look weak. Making us look vulnerable. Then we find them," Cortez said, "and we end it." "How? We don't even know who—" "I'll go up the mountain," Cortez interrupted. "Find this hermit. Ask him some questions. And if he doesn't answer?" The scarred man smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "Everyone answers eventually." Back at the cabin, Rowan was teaching Sarah to make snares when she suddenly stopped, hands frozen over the wire. "What's wrong?" he asked. "They're going to come looking. You know that, right?" "Probably." "And when they do?" Rowan finished the snare, tested the tension. "Depends on who comes and how many. You can't fight all four of them. Don't plan to fight anyone. Fighting's messy." "Then what?" He looked at her. "You ever see an avalanche start?" "No. Starts with one rock, just one. Hits another rock, that hits two more, those hit four. Before you know it, the whole mountain's moving. Can't stop it, can't control it, just have to let it run." "I don't understand." "Those men down there, they're used to controlling things. Used to being the rocks that don't move. But everyone moves if you apply the right pressure. Just takes patience." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, "How long were you a soldier?" The question caught him off guard. 8 years? "Why?" "Because you think like one. All this, the wire, the horse, the break-ins, it's not random. It's strategy." "Maybe. Definitely." She went back to working the snare. "My father was a soldier too, in China before he came here. He used to tell me stories about Sun Tzu. Ever hear of him?" "No." "Ancient general, wrote a whole book about war. One thing he said stuck with me. Supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting." Rowan smiled slightly. "Smart man." "He was. Said the best victories are the ones where the enemy defeats themselves." "Is that what we're doing? Making them defeat themselves?" Sarah met his eyes. "I don't know. Are we?" Before Rowan could answer, a sound froze them both. Voices. Distant but getting closer. He moved fast, grabbed his rifle, motioned Sarah inside. She went without argument, understanding the urgency. Rowan positioned himself by the window, watching the tree line. 3 men emerged from the trail. No, 4. Cortez in front, 3 others behind. All armed. "Oh, Cortez's voice carried across the clearing. We know you're in there. Come out. We just want to talk. Rowan didn't move. We can do this easy or hard, Cortez continued. Your choice. Sarah appeared at Rowan's shoulder, pistol in hand. He shook his head at her. Not yet. I'm counting to 10, Cortez called. Then we come in. Rowan made a decision. He opened the door, stepped out onto the porch. Rifle held casual, but ready. Help you gentlemen with something? Cortez's eyes narrowed. You Rowan Hale? That's what the land deed says. We're looking for someone. Girl who went missing a few weeks back. Asian, small. You seen anyone like that? See lots of things. Deer, elk, occasional mountain lion. No people, though. That's why I live up here. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. One of the other men stepped forward. Rowan recognized him from Sarah's description. William Gates. The lumberman was trying to look tough, but his eyes kept darting around nervously. Listen, friend, Gates said. We don't want trouble. Just asking questions. Asked, answered. Now get off my property. Your property? Cortez laughed. Last I checked, this was federal land. Last I checked, you weren't federal. The tension ratcheted up. Hands moved toward guns. Rowan's finger found the trigger guard. Then a new voice cut through the standoff. That's enough. Everyone turned. A fifth man had appeared, older, with a sheriff's star pinned to his coat. Thomas Boone, if Rowan remembered Miller's gossip correctly. Sheriff, Cortez said, irritation clear, this doesn't concern you. Man's on his own land, you're threatening him with guns. That concerns me plenty. Boone walked forward, positioning himself between the two groups. Mr. Hale, these men bothering you? Rowan studied the sheriff. Hard to read, could be genuine, could be playing. They're leaving, Rowan said. Right now. Boone nodded. You heard him. Move along. We have every right, Gates started. You have the right to leave before I arrest you for trespassing and intimidation. That work for you? Cortez's jaw clenched, but he stepped back. This isn't over. Yeah, it is, Boone said flatly. Now get. The four men retreated, but Cortez kept his eyes on the cabin until he disappeared into the trees. Rowan didn't relax until they were gone. Boone remained, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. You're Hale, he said. Not a question. And you're the sheriff. Been hearing interesting things lately. Thefts, vandalism, all targeting the same few men. That so? It is. Same men who just showed up at your door. Rowan said nothing. Boone sighed. I'm not stupid, Hale. Something's going on. Has been for weeks. And I think you know what it is. Can't help you. Can't or won't. Both. The sheriff studied him for a long moment. I've been wearing this badge for 23 years, seen a lot of things, most of them bad. And you know what I've learned? What's that? That in a town like Copper Valley, there's what people say happened and what actually happened. And those two things are rarely the same. Rowan waited. James Brennan is a powerful man, Boone continued, owns half the valley, employs a quarter of the population. When he talks, people listen, including me sometimes, because that's politics. Sounds corrupt? It is, but it's also reality. I've got a wife, a son, a pension coming in 3 years. Can't afford to make enemies of men like Brennan. Then why are you here? Boone looked toward the cabin, and Rowan knew he'd seen Sarah in the window. Because sometimes, the sheriff said quietly, what people say happened and what actually happened are so far apart that even a tired old man like me can't ignore it anymore. He turned to leave, then stopped. There's a girl missing. Sarah Chen. Worked at the hotel. Sweet kid. Her mother's been sick with worry. Filed a report 3 weeks ago. And I did what I was supposed to do. Asked questions, followed leads, came up empty. Maybe she left town. Maybe. Or maybe something worse happened. Maybe she ran into trouble with the wrong people. Maybe those people thought they could make a problem disappear. Boone's voice hardened. Maybe they were wrong. Rowan's grip tightened on the rifle. I can't prove anything, Boone said. Don't have evidence. Don't have witnesses willing to talk. In the eyes of the law, there's no case. So justice doesn't get served. Not the official kind. But there's other kinds of justice. Slower kinds. The kind that doesn't happen in a courtroom. Their eyes met. If someone were to pursue that kind of justice, Boone said carefully, I'd have to investigate, ask questions, do my job. Naturally. But investigating takes time, especially in winter. Roads are bad, communication slow, might take me weeks to follow up on complaints. Might take months, Rowan said. Might indeed. Boone started walking. Stay safe up here, Mr. Hale. Mountain's dangerous this time of year. Never know what might fall. He disappeared into the trees, leaving Rowan alone on the porch. Sarah emerged from the cabin. Was that really the sheriff? Yeah. He knows I'm here. Yeah. And he's not going to do anything about it? Doesn't seem like it. She leaned against the porch rail, processing. Why? Because he's tired. And maybe, just maybe, he's sick of protecting men who don't deserve protection. You trust him? Rowan thought about it. No, but I believe he's on our side. That'll do for now. That night they sat by the fire and planned. The visits from Cortez and the others had changed things, escalated them. They're scared, Sarah said. That's why they came. Being scared makes them dangerous. Good. I want them dangerous. I want them panicking. Panic leads to mistakes, but it also leads to violence. I'm not afraid of violence anymore. Her eyes were hard. I've already survived the worst they can do. Rowan wasn't sure that was true, but he didn't argue. We need to be smarter, he said instead. More careful. They're watching now. Then we make them watch the wrong things. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern shifted. The incidents became more psychological, less physical. Brennan received letters at his home, anonymous, each one containing a single sentence about something only he would know, private business dealings, debts owed, secrets kept. Someone was telling him, I know everything. Hollis found a photograph slipped under his door. Him and Cortez walking into a building on the edge of town. Nothing incriminating by itself. But the building was a known gambling house, and Hollis had publicly denied ever going there. Someone was telling him, I'm watching. Gates started receiving phone calls, late at night, no one on the other end, just breathing. Then a click, over and over. Someone was telling him, you're never safe. And Cortez woke one morning to find his car's tires slashed. Not cut, carefully sliced in a pattern that took time and precision. Left on each windshield was a playing card, the ace of spades. Someone was telling him, I'm coming. Sarah helped with some of it. She was the one who suggested the letters, who knew details about Brennan's business from her time cleaning his hotel suite. She'd overheard phone calls, seen documents left on desks. Rich men think service workers are invisible, she said. They talk like we're not even there. Rowan used that information carefully, crafting each letter to sound like it came from someone inside Brennan's organization. Sowing distrust, making the man wonder who'd betrayed him. It was working. Miller reported that Brennan had fired 3 employees in 1 week, paranoid they were leaking information. Hollis and Gates had a falling out over money, and Cortez was drinking more, sleeping less, jumping at shadows. The 4 men who'd seemed so untouchable a month ago were fracturing, but there was a cost. Rowan barely slept anymore. He was constantly watching, planning, executing. The isolation he'd cherished for 7 years had become a prison of his own making. Every sound could be an attack. Every stranger could be a threat. And Sarah, for all her new strength, still woke screaming most nights. One evening, after a particularly bad nightmare, she sat on the porch wrapped in blankets while Rowan made tea. I thought it would feel better, she said. Hurting them back. Making them afraid. Does it? No. I still feel broken. Like something inside me died in that hotel room, and no amount of revenge will bring it back. Rowan handed her the tea. Revenge doesn't fix what's broken, just gives you something to focus on besides the pain. Is that why you're doing this, to distract yourself? Maybe. Or maybe I'm doing it because someone should. Because they can't keep getting away with it. But they are getting away with it. They're scared, but they're still free. Still living their lives. For now. Sarah looked at him. You have a plan. Something bigger than vandalism and scare tactics. I have an idea, whether it works. He shrugged. Tell me. So he did. The plan was simple in concept, brutal in execution. They weren't going to attack the four men directly. Instead, they were going to make the valley turn on them. Reputation is everything in a small town, Rowan explained. These men have power because people respect them, fear them, need them. Take that away and they're just four men who did something terrible. How do we take it away? We make them confess. They'll never confess. Not directly, but people confess in other ways. Through actions, through guilt, through the cracks that show when pressure gets high enough. Over the next week, they refined the strategy. Rowan would continue the psychological pressure, ramping it up, making the four men so paranoid they'd start turning on each other. Meanwhile, Sarah would do something harder. She'd go back to the valley. Absolutely not, Rowan said when she first suggested it. It has to be me. I need to talk to the women. The ones who left town, the ones who came before me. You don't even know if they'll talk. They'll talk to me, because I'm proof they weren't crazy, proof it really happened. It took 3 days of arguing before Rowan agreed, and only on the condition that she was never alone, that she stayed in public places, and that she carried his pistol at all times. Sarah left on a clear morning in early March. The snow was melting, streams running high. She wore plain clothes, a scarf covering her hair, and kept her eyes down as she entered the valley. Rowan watched from a ridge, rifle ready, every muscle tense. She was gone for 8 hours. When she returned, her face was pale, but her eyes were bright. I found 3 of them, Ad, she said. 3 women who left because of Brennan or his friends. One of them kept evidence, letters, threatening letters telling her to leave town or else. Will she testify? She's scared, they all are. But Sarah pulled a folded paper from her coat. She gave me copies, said if I could promise she'd be safe, she'd come forward. Rowan read the letters. They were damning, explicit threats signed with initials that matched Brennan's business partner. This is good, he said. This is really good. There's more. One of the women, she used to work for the sheriff's office. She said Boone investigated Brennan years ago for something similar, never went anywhere because the witness disappeared. Disappeared how? Found dead in her apartment, officially ruled a suicide. Rowan's blood went cold. Danny Cortez. Probably. The woman didn't know for sure, but the timing matches. 2 days after she gave her statement, she was dead. They stared at each other, the weight of what they were doing settling over them. We can't protect these women, Sarah said quietly. If they come forward, if they testify, Cortez will kill them. We both know it. Then we don't let it get that far. What do you mean? Rowan stood, began pacing. We've been playing defense, taking shots, hoping something sticks. But we need to go on offense, force their hand before they can retaliate. How? He stopped, looked at her. We give Boone everything, the letters, the testimony, all of it. But we do it publicly, in front of witnesses. Make it impossible to cover up. Brennan will deny everything. Let him. With enough evidence, with enough people talking, denial won't matter. The valley will turn. It has to. Sarah nodded slowly. When? Soon. But first we need one more thing. What? We need one of them to crack, really crack, break the silence themselves. They chose Gates. He was the weakest link, the one showing the most strain. His lumber mill was struggling. His marriage was falling apart. His sleep was non-existent. One more push might do it. Rowan spent 2 days crafting the final psychological blow. A letter left on Gates's pillow while he was at work. His wife would find it first, read it before he got home. The letter was from a concerned friend. It detailed Gates's involvement in Sarah's assault. Every detail, every moment, written in clean clinical language that made it impossible to dismiss as rumor. At the bottom, a single line, "Your husband is a monster, and soon everyone will know." Gates's wife confronted him that evening. The whole valley heard the screaming match, heard her throw him out of the house, heard her call her brother, the lawyer, sobbing. By morning, Gates had checked into a motel on the highway, 30 miles from town. By afternoon, Sheriff Boone had received an anonymous package. Inside, copies of Sarah's testimony, the threatening letters, and a signed statement from Gates's wife, who'd decided her husband's secrets were no longer worth protecting. The avalanche had started, and there was no stopping it now. Sheriff Thomas Boone sat at his desk staring at the package for 20 minutes before he opened it. He'd been a lawman long enough to know when something was about to explode in his face, and this package, plain brown paper, no return address, delivered by a kid who said a woman gave him $5 to drop it off, had explosion written all over it. His deputy, his son Elias, leaned against the doorframe watching him. You going to open it or just stare at it all day? Thinking about burning it. Why would you do that? Because once I open it, I can't unknow what's inside. And I've got a feeling what's inside is going to make my life very complicated. Elias pushed off the doorframe, walked over, then let me open it. No. Dad, I said no. Boone pulled the package closer, protective. This came to me. That means it's my problem. He used his letter opener to slice through the tape. Inside were 3 manila folders, each labeled with a name. Sarah Chen, William Gates, James Brennan. His stomach dropped. The first folder contained a handwritten statement dated 3 days ago. Sarah Chen's account of what happened the night of February 8th. Every detail. Every name. Signed and witnessed by someone identified only as R.H. The second folder held copies of threatening letters sent to various women over the past 5 years. 3 different women, all former employees of businesses owned by Brennan or his associates. All told to leave town. All gone within weeks of receiving the letters. The third folder was the gut punch, a signed statement from Margaret Gates, wife of William Gates. In it, she detailed a conversation she'd had with her husband 2 nights ago after finding a letter on her pillow. Her husband had confessed. Everything. Named names. Implicated himself and 3 others. Boone set the papers down carefully, like they might detonate. What is it? Elias asked. The end of everything we know. That's not an answer. Boone looked at his son, seeing him clearly, maybe for the first time in years. Elias was 32, married, had a daughter on the way. He wore the deputy's badge with pride, believed in law and order the way Boone had once believed. That faith was about to be tested. Remember Sarah Chen? Boone asked. The girl who went missing? The maid from the hotel. Yeah, we looked for her. Didn't find anything. Was such a sham. We didn't look hard enough. He slid the first folder across the desk, watched his son's face change as he read, watched the color drain, the jaw tighten, the hands start to shake. This can't be real, Elias said finally. It's real. Brennan, Marcus Hollis, these are respected men, pillars of the community. Read the other folders. Elias did. With each page, he looked more sick. When he finished, he sat down hard in the chair across from his father. We have to arrest them. On what evidence? Anonymous statements and threatening letters that could have been written by anyone? You just said it was real. I believe it's real. But belief doesn't hold up in court. We need Sarah Chen. We need her to testify. So we find her. She doesn't want to be found. That's the whole point. She's scared. And she should be, because if half of this is true, these men tried to kill her once already. Elias stood, started pacing. This is insane. We can't just sit on this. We're not going to, but we need to be smart, careful. Boone gathered the folders. First thing, we verify what we can. Talk to Margaret Gates. See if she'll confirm her statement. And if she does, then we start asking harder questions. They found Margaret Gates at her sister's house on the north end of town. She answered the door with red eyes and a coffee cup that shook in her hands. Mrs. Gates, Boone said gently, can we come in? She looked past them, scanning the street. Is William with you? No, ma'am, just us. She let them in. The house was quiet, neat. Her sister hovered in the kitchen, protective. I know why you're here, Margaret said once they were seated. Someone sent you my statement. Yes, ma'am. We need to know if it's true. Every word. She set the coffee down. I found a letter on my bed. It told me what my husband did. What he and those other men did to that poor girl. Did you keep the letter? I burned it. Didn't want it in my house. Her voice cracked. But I confronted William. Asked him if it was true, and he broke down, confessed everything. Elias leaned forward. What exactly did he say? That they'd been drinking at the hotel. That one of them, Brennan, I think, called up a maid, said they wanted to have some fun. William said he didn't want to at first, but the others pressured him, said he was being a coward. Boone felt his anger building, tamped it down. Go on. They heard her, all four of them. Then they panicked. Marcus Hollis said they needed to get rid of her, that she'd talk. So they drove her up the mountain and left her there in the storm. Did your husband say if she was alive when they left her? Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. He said she was begging, crying, but they drove away anyway. The room went silent. Mrs. Gates, Boone said carefully, would you be willing to testify to this? In court? She looked at him with hollow eyes. Will it matter? It might. With your testimony and Sarah Chen's, Sarah Chen is dead. They killed her. That's what my husband thinks anyway. What if she's not dead? Something flickered across Margaret's face. Hope, maybe, or fear. If she's alive, she said slowly, if she can tell her story, then yes, I'll testify. I'll tell everyone what my husband told me. They left with a recorded statement and Margaret's promise to come to the station the next day to make it official. Driving back through town, Elias was quiet, processing. We need to find Sarah Chen, he said finally. I know where she is. Elias looked at him sharply. What? Been knowing for a few weeks now. She's up on the mountain with Rowan Hale. The hermit. Dad, why didn't you... Because she's safe there, and because the moment we bring her down, she becomes a target. We can protect her. Boone pulled the car over, turned to face his son. Can we? Really? You think Brennan's just going to let her testify? You think Danny Cortez won't make her disappear the same way he's made others disappear? We're the law. We don't let that happen. We're two men with badges in a town owned by the people we're trying to arrest. Wake up, Elias. The law only works when the people with power want it to work. His son's face hardened. Then what do? Nothing? Let them get away with it? No. We make it impossible for them to get away with it. We make it so public, so undeniable, that they can't hide. How? Boone put the car back in gear. We bring the mountain to them. The next morning, Sheriff Boone drove up the mountain alone. Elias had wanted to come, but Boone refused. This conversation needed to happen without witnesses, without badges, without the weight of official business. He found the cabin easily enough. Smoke rising from the chimney, fresh tracks in the melting snow. He parked his truck at the tree line and walked the last 100 yards, making sure his approach was visible. Rowan Hale was waiting on the porch, rifle resting against his leg. Sheriff? Mr. Hale. You alone? I am. Rowan studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward the door. Come in. Coffee's hot. Inside, Sarah Chen sat at a small table, a pistol within easy reach. She looked different from the photo Boone had in her missing person file. Thinner, harder, but alive. Miss Chen, Boone said, I'm glad to see you're safe. She didn't respond, just watched him with wary eyes. Rowan poured 3 cups of coffee, set them on the table. Nobody sat. I got your package, Boone said. Figured you would. Margaret Gates confirmed her husband's confession. She's willing to testify. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. She is? If you are. The weight of that hung in the air. Sarah looked at Rowan, who kept his expression neutral, letting her decide. If I testify, she said slowly, they'll kill me. They'll try, Boone corrected, but we can protect you. How? You're one sheriff in a town they own, which is why we don't do this in town. Boone set his coffee down. We do it here, on the mountain, in front of everyone. Rowan's eyes narrowed. Explain. There's a clearing about 2 miles south of here, big enough for a crowd. I bring the whole town up, make it an event, a public hearing, put Sarah on record in front of 100 witnesses. That's insane, Sarah said. Brennan will never come. None of them will. They will if I arrest them first. Rowan and Sarah exchanged glances. You're going to arrest James Brennan? Rowan said. On what charge? Conspiracy? Assault? Attempted murder? I've got Margaret Gates's testimony, the threatening letters, and Sarah's statement. It's enough for an arrest warrant. It's not enough for a conviction. No. But it's enough to hold them for 72 hours while we get the real evidence. And once Sarah testifies publicly, once the whole valley hears what happened, there's no covering it up. Sarah shook her head. You're asking me to stand in front of those men and relive the worst night of my life, in front of everyone I've ever known. I am, and I know what I'm asking, but Sarah, Boone's voice softened. You're not the first. You won't be the last, not unless someone stops them. I can't. You can. You already survived what they did. That's the hard part. This is just talking. Just talking, her voice rose. Just standing there while they stare at me, while people judge me, decide if I'm telling the truth or making it up for attention. Some will judge, Boone admitted. Some always do. But others will believe. Others will stand with you, and that might be enough. Sarah turned away, arms wrapped around herself. Rowan watched her, then looked at Boone. Give us a minute. Boone nodded, stepped outside. Through the window, he watched them talk. Couldn't hear the words, but he saw the way Rowan's hand rested on Sarah's shoulder, saw the way she leaned into him, drawing strength. Whatever was between these two, it was more than just survivor and rescuer. When they came back out, Sarah's face was set. I'll do it, she said, but I have conditions. Name them. First, my mother. She needs protection. If Brennan can't get to me, he'll go after her. Done. We'll move her to my house. My wife will look after her. Second, I want Rowan with me, the whole time. Boone looked at Rowan, who nodded. Agreed. A third. Sarah took a breath. When this is over, when I've said what I need to say, I don't want to be treated like a victim anymore. No pity. No special treatment. Just let me move on. That one's harder, Boone said honestly, but I'll do what I can. They shook on it, and Boone felt the weight of what they'd just committed to settle over him like a physical thing. The arrests happened fast, before word could spread. Boone and Elias, backed by 2 deputies borrowed from the county, picked up Gates first, found him at the motel, half drunk, staring at a pistol on the nightstand. William Gates, Boone said, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit assault and attempted murder. Gates didn't fight, just put his hands out for the cuffs and started crying. Marcus Hollis was next. He was at his father's office when they arrived. The mayor tried to intervene, threaten lawsuits and political consequences. Boone ignored him. You're making a mistake, Hollis said as they cuffed him. My father will have your badge. Maybe, but you'll still be in a cell. Brennan was at the mine when they came for him. He stood in his office, surrounded by maps and reports, looking every inch the successful businessman. This is harassment, he said calmly. I'll sue the county for wrongful arrest. You do that. Right now, you're coming with us. On what charge? Read the warrant. Brennan's eyes scanned the paper. His expression never changed, but Boone saw his grip tighten on the document. This is absurd. You have no evidence. We have plenty. You'll see it at the hearing. What hearing? The one in 3 days, up on the mountain, public record, open to everyone. For the first time, Brennan's composure cracked. You can't be serious. Dead serious. Now let's go. Cortez was the problem. They found his boarding house empty, his belongings gone. The landlady said he'd left that morning, paid through the month, and walked out with a duffel bag. He's running, Elias said. Or preparing, Boone countered. Put out a warrant. Check the roads. He can't have gotten far. But Cortez had gotten far, all the way back to the mountain. Rowan spotted him just before dawn, moving through the trees below the cabin. Professional approach, using cover, weapon drawn. Not running. Hunting. Rowan woke Sarah with a hand over her mouth. She came awake fast, eyes wide. Cortez, he whispered. Outside. Get to the root cellar. Now. She moved without argument, grabbing the pistol and extra ammunition. The root cellar was built into the hillside behind the cabin, camouflaged and defensible. Rowan had prepared it for exactly this scenario. Once Sarah was secured, Rowan took position at the window. He could see Cortez now, maybe 60 yards out, working his way closer. The scarred man was good, but Rowan had been living on this mountain for 7 years. He knew every approach, every angle. "Hail!" Cortez's voice echoed across the clearing. "I know you're in there, and I know you've got the girl." Rowan stayed silent. "Brennan's in jail. Hollis, too. This is over. Just send her out. We can all walk away." "Like hell," Rowan muttered. He tracked Cortez's movement, waiting. The man was trying to flank, get to the cabin's blind spot. Amateur mistake. There was no blind spot. Rowan had designed it that way. When Cortez broke cover to dash between trees, Rowan fired. Not to hit, just to warn. The bullet kicked up snow 3 feet to Cortez's left. The scarred man dove for cover. "Next one's not a warning," Rowan called. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Yeah, I'm good at that." Silence. Rowan waited, rifle ready. His hands were steady, his breathing controlled. This was familiar territory. Not the mountain, but the situation, the waiting, the calculation, the knowledge that someone was about to die. He'd hoped those days were behind him. "I've got no quarrel with you, Hale," Cortez said. "This is between me and the girl. Walk away." "Can't do that." "Why not? She's nothing to you." "She's someone. That's enough." More silence. Then movement, fast. Cortez broke from cover, firing as he ran. Bullets punched through the cabin's walls, shattering the window. Rowan dropped to the floor, tracked the movement, fired twice. The second shot caught Cortez in the shoulder, spun him around. He went down hard. Rowan was out the door before Cortez could recover, rifle trained on the fallen man. Cortez was struggling to his feet, his gun hand useless, blood spreading across his shirt. But his left hand went to his belt, came up with a knife. "Don't," Rowan said. Cortez smiled, the scar pulling his face into something ugly. "You won't shoot an unarmed man." "You're armed, and I've shot better men than you for worse reasons." They stared at each other across 10 feet of snow. "She tell you what she did?" Cortez asked. "Before that night?" "Doesn't matter what she did." "She was a tease, led Brennan on, then acted all innocent when he wanted what she'd been promising." "That's a lie." "Is it? Or is it just a story you're choosing not to believe?" Rowan's finger tightened on the trigger. "See, that's the thing about truth," Cortez continued, still smiling. "It's whatever people want to believe. And people in Copper Valley? They want to believe Brennan. They need to believe him. Because if they don't, if they admit what he is, they have to admit they let it happen. Shut up. You think you're going to change anything with this hearing? You think anyone's going to care? She's a half-breed maid who won't know her place. He's a man who gives them jobs and pays their bills. Who do you think they'll choose?" I said, "Shut up." Cortez took a step forward. "You want to shoot me? Go ahead. Won't change anything. Won't save her. Won't save this valley from the truth about itself." Sarah's voice cut through the tension. "He's right." Both men turned. She stood in the cabin doorway, pistol in hand. "Sarah, get back inside," Rowan said. "He's right," she repeated, walking forward. "People won't believe me. They'll choose to believe him, because it's easier." "That doesn't mean we stop trying." She stopped beside Rowan, looked at Cortez. "You were there," she said. "That night. You held me down while Marcus Hollis." She stopped, swallowed. "You looked me in the eyes while you did it." Cortez's smile faded. "I remember every second," Sarah continued. "Every word you said, every laugh. You enjoyed it. Girl, I'm not a girl. I'm a woman you tried to destroy, and I'm still here." The pistol came up, steady in her hands. Rowan saw what was about to happen, started to move. "Sarah, don't—" The gunshot was deafening in the morning stillness, but Sarah hadn't fired. Cortez had. His left hand had gone to a backup piece concealed in his boot, came up fast. Too fast for Rowan to block. Too slow to beat Sarah's trigger pull. Both guns fired within a heartbeat of each other. Cortez's shot went wide, thrown off by the bullet Sarah put through his chest. He staggered back, surprise on his face, then collapsed. Sarah stood frozen, pistol still extended, smoke curling from his barrel. Rowan moved to Cortez, checked for a pulse. Found nothing. "Is he dead?" Sarah's voice was small, childlike. "Yeah." I killed him. He was drawing on us. It was self-defense. I killed him. She was shaking now, the gun wavering. I killed another person. Rowan gently took the pistol from her hands, engaged the safety. You survived. That's all. She looked at him, eyes huge and lost. It doesn't feel like surviving. He pulled her into his arms, felt her shake against him. I know. They stood like that for a long time, the morning sun breaking over the peaks, the dead man cooling in the snow. Finally, Sarah pulled back. What do we do now? Now we tell Boone. And then? Rowan looked toward the valley below. Then we finish this. Sheriff Boone arrived 2 hours later with Elias and 4 other deputies. They examined the scene, took statements, photographed Cortez's body and the weapons. Clear self-defense, Boone said. He drew first, fired first. You were well within your rights. Sarah nodded, but didn't speak. She sat on the cabin porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. Elias approached Rowan while the others worked. She okay? No, but she will be. My father says you were military. That true? Was. See combat? More than I wanted to. Elias looked at Cortez's covered body. This your first since you got back? Rowan didn't answer. Right. Elias glanced at Sarah. She's strong, stronger than anyone I've ever met. What she's been through, what she's about to do, she shouldn't have to do any of it. No, but she's choosing to anyway. That takes guts. Boone joined them, brushing snow off his coat. The hearing's set for tomorrow, he said, clearing 2 miles south, like we discussed. I've spread word through the valley, expecting a good turnout. And the prisoners? Rowan asked. In cells. They'll be transported up at dawn under guard. Brennan's got lawyers on the way, I assume. 3 of them, coming in from Denver tonight. But it doesn't matter. This isn't a trial. It's a public hearing. They can object all they want. Sarah stood, walked over to join them. Her face was pale but determined. I want to see them, she said. Boone frowned. Who? Brennan, Hollis, Gates? I want to look them in the eyes before tomorrow. Sarah, I don't think I need to. I need to see them behind bars. Need to know they're real and not just nightmares. Rowan put a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to prove anything. I'm not proving anything. I'm taking back control. They took it from me that night. I'm taking it back. Boone and Rowan exchanged glances. Finally, the sheriff nodded. All right, but just for a minute, and Hale comes with you. They drove down together as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of orange and red. Sarah was quiet the whole way, hands folded in her lap, breathing steady. The county jail was a squat brick building on the east side of town. Inside it smelled like sweat and old coffee. The 3 prisoners were in separate cells, each with their lawyer. When Brennan saw Sarah, his expression never changed, just looked at her like she was something beneath notice. Hollis went pale, turned away. Gates started crying. Sarah walked down the corridor slowly, looking at each of them in turn. You're making a mistake, Brennan said. His voice was calm, reasonable. Whatever story you've been told, whatever you think happened. I know what happened. Sarah cut him off. I was there. A scared girl's fantasy, regret turned into accusation. I have scars. From the mountain, from your own clumsiness. Sarah stepped closer to the bars. You're going to lie. Tomorrow, in front of everyone, you're going to stand up and call me a liar. Say I wanted it, say I led you on. Brennan smiled slightly. Will I? Yes. Because that's what men like you do. You take, and you take, and you take, and then you make everyone believe the people you took from wanted you to take it. Careful, girl. Slander's a serious accusation. Truth is a defense. His smile faded. You think you're going to win this? You think anyone in this valley will believe a half-breed maid over me? Sarah didn't flinch. I think you're already losing. You're in a cell. Your reputation is crumbling. Your friends are turning on you, and tomorrow everyone will know what you are. She turned to walk away. They'll destroy you, Brennan called after her. The lawyers, the questions, the doubt. By the time they're done, you'll wish you'd died on that mountain. Sarah stopped, looked back. I did die on that mountain, she said quietly. The girl you hurt is gone. What's left is someone who's done being afraid. She walked out, Rowan close behind. In the truck, she let out a long breath. You okay? Rowan asked. I'm tired. Tired of carrying this. Tired of being afraid. She looked at him. Tomorrow I put it down. One way or another. One way or another? He echoed. They drove back up the mountain in silence, both of them knowing that tomorrow would change everything. For better or worse, the truth was about to come out, and there would be no hiding from it. Not for anyone. Dawn broke cold and clear over the mountain, the kind of morning where sound carried for miles and every breath hung visible in the air. Rowan woke to find Sarah already dressed, sitting at the table with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold hours ago. You sleep at all? He asked. No. He poured fresh coffee, set it in front of her. She didn't touch it. It's not too late to change your mind, he said. We can disappear, head north, start over somewhere else. Running doesn't fix anything. Neither does this. Not really. You know that, right? Even if they believe you, even if they arrest all of them, it doesn't undo what happened. Sarah finally looked at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. I know, but maybe it stops it from happening to someone else. Maybe. That has to be enough. They gathered their things in silence. Rowan loaded his rifle out of habit, though he didn't expect trouble. Sheriff Boone had promised security, deputies stationed around the clearing. But promises were cheap, and Rowan had learned long ago to trust his own preparation over anyone else's assurances. The clearing was 2 miles south, accessed by an old logging road that had mostly grown over. As they walked, they could hear voices ahead, the murmur of a crowd gathering. Rowan's stomach tightened. He'd spent 7 years avoiding people, and now he was walking straight into a mass of them. When they emerged from the tree line, he stopped short. There had to be 200 people there, maybe more. They'd come in trucks and on horseback. Some had even walked up from the valley. A makeshift stage had been erected from lumber planks and sawhorses. Chairs were scattered in rough rows, though most people stood, talking in clusters. Sheriff Boone spotted them, waved them over. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept either. Bigger turnout than I expected, he said. You tell them what this was about? Rowan asked. Told them there'd be testimony regarding a serious crime. Word spreads fast in a small town. Sarah was staring at the crowd, her face pale. I can't do this. Yes, you can, Boone said firmly. And you won't be alone. Mrs. Gates is here. So are the other women you talked to. They're standing with you. He gestured to a group of women off to one side. Margaret Gates stood among them, along with 3 others Rowan recognized from Sarah's descriptions. They looked scared but determined. Sarah's breathing was shallow, rapid. Rowan recognized the signs of panic. Look at me, he said, stepping in front of her. Not them, me. Her eyes found his. You've already done the hard part, he continued. You survived. You made it down that mountain alive. Everything after that is just noise. That's easy for you to say. No, it's not. I know what it's like to stand in front of people and tell truth they don't want to hear. Did it after the war, at the inquiry. Nobody believed me then either. But I still said it, because someone had to. Did it help? No, but I could live with myself after. That's what matters. A commotion near the road drew their attention. 3 sheriff's vehicles were arriving, prisoners in the back of each. Brennan emerged first, flanked by his lawyers. He changed into an expensive suit, looked every inch the successful businessman. Hollis came next, then Gates, who could barely stand. The crowd pressed closer, voices rising. Some were angry, shouting accusations. Others looked confused, uncertain. A few were clearly there to support Brennan, wearing his company colors, carrying signs that read, "Innocent until proven guilty," and "Stand with Brennan." Boone's deputies formed a line, keeping the crowd back as the prisoners were led to a roped-off area near the stage. Brennan's lead lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Davidson, immediately started objecting. "This is a farce," Davidson announced loudly. "My client hasn't been formally charged. This hearing has no legal standing. It's a public inquiry," Boone said. "Perfectly legal. Your client is free to speak or remain silent. We demand proper representation, a real courtroom. Then you'll get one, after we hear testimony here." Davidson turned to the crowd. This is a witch hunt, a desperate attempt to smear a good man based on the accusations of a troubled woman with an axe to grind. I don't have an axe, Sarah said quietly, but her voice carried in the sudden silence. I just have the truth. People turned to look at her. Rowan saw recognition dawn on some faces. Others looked confused, trying to place her. One woman gasped, whispered to her husband. Boone gestured Sarah toward the stage. Miss Chen, if you're ready. The walk to that stage was the longest 20 feet of Sarah's life. She could feel every eye on her, hear whispers spreading like fire through dry grass. Someone called out, "That's the maid!" Another voice, "I thought she was dead." She climbed the steps, legs shaking. A simple wooden chair had been placed in the center. She sat, hands gripping the armrest to keep them from trembling. Boone stood beside her, addressing the crowd. Most of you know me. Been sheriff here for 23 years. In that time, I've tried to uphold the law fairly, treat everyone equal. But sometimes the law isn't enough. Sometimes you need truth to come first. He paused, letting that sink in. Sarah Chen is going to tell you what happened to her on the night of February 8th. When she's done, others will speak. Then you can decide for yourselves what's true. This is improper procedure, Davidson objected. Noted. Miss Chen, whenever you're ready. Sarah looked out at the sea of faces, some sympathetic, most uncertain, a few openly hostile. She found her mother in the crowd, brought up from the valley under protection. The old woman was crying, hands pressed to her mouth. Sarah took a breath. My name is Sarah Chen, she began. Her voice was too quiet. Someone in back yelled that they couldn't hear. She started again, louder. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 24 years old. I worked as a maid at the Copper Valley Hotel. She told the story, all of it, leaving nothing out. Her voice cracked several times. She had to stop twice to compose herself, but she kept going. When she described what happened in that hotel room, several women in the crowd started crying. Men looked away, uncomfortable. A few people left, unable to hear more. Brennan stood with his arms crossed, face impassive. Hollis stared at the ground. Gates was openly weeping. They drove me up the mountain, Sarah continued, her voice steadier now. Made me walk in just my dress. It was snowing. I was barefoot. They followed in the truck, taking shots at me. Not trying to kill me, just hunting me. A man in the crowd shouted, Lies! Brennan wouldn't do that. Boone silenced him with a look. I jumped into the creek, Sarah said. Thought drowning was better than freezing, better than letting them catch me again. She looked directly at Brennan. But someone found me, pulled me out, saved my life when you thought the mountain would finish what you started. Alleged, Davidson interjected. Everything she's saying is alleged. Let her finish, Boone said. Sarah stood, walked to the edge of the stage. I know some of you won't believe me. I know I'm just a maid, just a half-breed girl with no family, no money, no power. But I'm telling the truth, and I can prove it. She unbuttoned the top of her shirt, pulled it aside to show the bruises still visible on her collarbone, pulled up her sleeves to reveal the scars on her arms. The crowd gasped. These are real, she said. The nightmares are real. The fear is real. What they did to me is real. She sat back down, exhausted. Boone stepped forward. Mrs. Margaret Gates has also come forward with testimony. Ma'am? Margaret climbed the stage, visibly shaking. She was sworn in, though the hearing had no official capacity for oaths. Then she spoke, recounting her husband's confession word for word. When she finished, William Gates stood in his roped area. It's true, he said, his voice breaking. Everything she said, everything Sarah said. We did it, I did it, and I've lived with that guilt every day since. The crowd erupted, shouts, accusations, demands for justice. Boone's deputies struggled to maintain order. Davidson was conferring frantically with Brennan, whose calm facade was finally cracking. Hollis looked like he might be sick. Another woman came forward, then another, each telling their own stories, how they'd been threatened, pressured, driven from town after encounters with Brennan or his associates. 3 women total, each one adding weight to Sarah's account. The fourth was only 19, trembling so badly she could barely speak. But she managed to say that Brennan had cornered her in his office 6 months ago. She'd quit the next day, too scared to report it. "Why should we believe any of this?" someone shouted from the crowd. "Women lie about this stuff all the time." "Why would 4 separate women lie?" Boone shot back. "What do they gain? Sarah lost her job, her home, nearly her life. Mrs. Gates destroyed her marriage. These other women risk their reputations just by being here." "Money!" another voice called. "They want settlement money." "Nobody's asking for money," Sarah said firmly. "I'm asking for justice." Brennan finally spoke. His lawyers tried to stop him, but he shook them off. "This is a coordinated attack," he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "These women have been coached, their stories coordinated. This mountain man," he pointed at Rowan, "he's orchestrated this whole thing. Probably angry about something, decided to use these women as weapons." Rowan stepped forward. "I didn't orchestrate anything. I just asked Sarah Chen who hurt her, and she told me. The rest followed from there." "Convenient. A hermit playing hero, using a vulnerable woman." "Watch your next words carefully," Rowan said, his voice low and dangerous. The two men stared at each other across the clearing. The crowd had gone quiet, sensing the violence barely contained. "You want to know what I think happened?" Brennan continued, addressing the crowd now. "I think this girl had a mental breakdown, wandered up the mountain in a storm, nearly died. This man found her, and instead of getting her proper help, he filled her head with fantasies, convinced her that something terrible happened when really she was just sick." "I wasn't sick," Sarah said. "I was raped by you and 3 other men." The word hung in the air, rape. Nobody had used it directly until now. "Alleged rape," Davidson corrected quickly. "No, rape, that's what it was. That's what we're calling it." Sarah stood again. "And I'm done letting you hide behind lawyers and money and power. You did it. You know it. I know it. And now everyone here knows it too." A woman in the crowd stood. "I believe her." Then another. "So do I." More voices joined. Not everyone. Not even most. But enough. A chorus of belief that grew louder. Brennan's expression hardened. "You're all being manipulated. Can't you see that?" "The only manipulation here is yours," Boone said. "You've manipulated this town for years, made people think you were untouchable. But you're not. I have the best lawyers in Denver, and I have 4 women willing to testify under oath. I have physical evidence. I have a confession from your co-conspirator." Boone stepped closer. "You're done, Brennan. We'll see about that." The hearing continued for another 2 hours. More people spoke, some supporting the women, others defending Brennan. It was messy, emotional, sometimes angry, but through it all, the truth kept emerging, persistent as water finding cracks in stone. By the time Boone called it to a close, the division in the crowd was clear. About half believed Sarah and the others. The rest were uncertain or openly skeptical, but nobody could claim ignorance anymore. As the crowd dispersed, heading back to their vehicles, conversations continued. Arguments erupted. Friends split over what they'd heard. The town was fracturing in real time. Sarah sat on the stage steps, drained. Her mother pushed through the deputies to reach her, pulled her into a fierce embrace. "My brave girl," her mother whispered in Mandarin. "So brave." Rowan stood guard nearby, watching Brennan being loaded back into the sheriff's vehicle. The man's lawyers were already on their phones, no doubt calling in favors, preparing defenses. Boone joined him. "That went better than I expected. Half of them don't believe her. Half of them do. That's more than we had yesterday." "What happens now?" "Now we wait for the county prosecutor, see if he'll bring formal charges based on what we've got." "And if he won't?" Boone was quiet for a moment. "Then we've done all we can do through official channels." They both knew what that meant. Sometimes the law wasn't enough. Over the following days, Copper Valley ate itself alive. The story spread fast, picked up by newspapers in Denver and beyond. Reporters descended on the small town, interviewing anyone who'd talk. Television crews set up on Main Street. Businesses that relied on Brennan's money started failing. The copper mine reduced operations. The smelter announced layoffs. People who'd worked for Brennan for decades suddenly found themselves unemployed, caught in the crossfire. Some blamed Sarah, called her a homewrecker, a liar. Worse, Someone spray-painted slurs on her mother's house. Rowan and Boone took turns standing guard there at night, but others rallied. A group of women organized a fund for Sarah and the other accusers. The local church, despite pressure from Brennan's supporters, opened its doors for a support meeting. 30 women showed up, some with their own stories of harassment and abuse that had gone unreported for years. The dam was breaking. William Gates, consumed by guilt, tried to hang himself in his cell. A deputy found him in time. He was transferred to a psychiatric facility in Denver, under watch. Marcus Hollis's father, the mayor, resigned in disgrace. The town council called for special elections, and James Brennan sat in his cell, silent now, watching his empire crumble through newspaper articles his lawyers brought him. The county prosecutor, a political animal named Harrison, dragged his feet. He had aspirations for higher office and knew that prosecuting Brennan would make powerful enemies. But the public pressure was mounting. The story had gone national. Congressional representatives were calling for investigations into corruption in rural law enforcement. Finally, 3 weeks after the Mountain hearing, Harrison announced formal charges. 4 counts of aggravated sexual assault, 2 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of conspiracy. The trial would be held in Denver, away from Copper Valley's influence. Sarah sat in Boone's office when she heard the news, Rowan beside her. "It's really happening," she said, still not quite believing it. "It's happening," Boone confirmed. "Trial's set for June. You'll need to testify again." "I know. It'll be harder than the Mountain hearing, real lawyers, real cross-examination. They'll try to break you." "They can try." But that night, back at Rowan's cabin, she wasn't so confident. She sat by the fire, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the flames. "What if I mess up?" she asked. "What if I get confused or say something wrong and they use it against me?" "Then you correct yourself and keep going." "What if the jury doesn't believe me?" "Then we accept it and move on." She looked at him. "How are you so calm about this?" "I'm not calm. I'm terrified. But being terrified doesn't help you, so I'm pretending." Despite everything, she smiled. "You're a terrible liar." "Yeah, I know." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the fire crack and pop. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said eventually. "Sure." "Why did you really help me? The truth this time." Rowan took a long time answering. "Because 7 years ago, I watched people do terrible things and told myself it wasn't my problem, that I was just following orders, just doing my job. And those excuses let me sleep at night, right up until they didn't." He stared into the fire. "When I found you in that creek, I had a choice. Pull you out or keep walking. And I realized that all my excuses, all my isolation, all my running from the world, it was just another way of doing nothing while terrible things happened. So, you saved me to save yourself? Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of being the guy who walks past people dying in creeks." Sarah reached over, took his hand. "You're a good man, Rowan Hale. Don't bet on it." "Too late. Already did." In the weeks leading up to the trial, the town continued its slow-motion collapse. More businesses closed. Families moved away, looking for work elsewhere. The copper mine shut down completely when Brennan's assets were frozen pending trial. Some people blamed Sarah for all of it, sent her threatening letters, made her mother's life hell. But others started to see the truth, that this wasn't Sarah's fault. This was the consequence of building a town's economy on the foundation of one corrupt man's wealth. Rowan accompanied Sarah to Denver for the trial. They stayed in a cheap hotel near the courthouse, spent evenings preparing her testimony with the prosecutor's team. The trial itself was brutal. Brennan's lawyers were everything Boone had warned about: sharp, aggressive, relentless. They attacked Sarah's character, her memory, her motives. Suggested she was mentally unstable, had fabricated the whole thing for attention or money. But Sarah held firm. When they asked if she was certain it was Brennan, she looked him in the eye and said, "I'm certain. I'll never forget his face." When they suggested she'd led him on, she said, "Nothing I did or said gave him the right to do what he did." When they implied she was lying, she unbuttoned her shirt in the courtroom, showed the scars to the jury, and said, "These are real. What he did to me is real, and no amount of expensive lawyers will change that." The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 days. When they came back, the foreman stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Sarah felt Rowan's hand squeeze hers, felt her mother collapse in tears behind her, heard gasps and sobs throughout the courtroom. Brennan showed no emotion, just stood there as the judge read the sentence. 35 years, no possibility of parole. Marcus Hollis got 20 years in a separate trial. William Gates received 15, with credit for cooperation and his obvious mental breakdown. Danny Cortez's death was ruled justifiable homicide. No charges filed. It was over. Or as over as these things ever get. Sarah and Rowan stood outside the courthouse in the summer sunshine, surrounded by reporters shouting questions. But Sarah wasn't listening to them. She was looking at the sky, feeling the warmth on her face, breathing free air. "How does it feel?" a reporter managed to shout loud enough to be heard. Sarah thought about it. "It feels like justice. Not healing, not closure, just justice." "What will you do now?" "Live my life." They pushed through the crowd to Rowan's truck. As he drove them out of Denver, heading back toward the mountains, Sarah rolled down the window, let the wind blow through her hair. "You okay?" Rowan asked. "I don't know yet. Ask me in a year." "Fair enough." They drove in silence for a while. Then Sarah said, "I'm not going back to Copper Valley." "Didn't figure you would. But I'm not staying on the mountain either." He glanced at her. "No? No, I'm going to build something new, somewhere in between." She looked at him. "And I'd like you to help, if you want to." "Build what?" "I don't know yet. A place where people can feel safe, where they can heal, where the world doesn't get to them." She smiled. "Kind of like your cabin, but with more people." "Sounds terrible." "Yeah, probably, but maybe worth trying anyway." Rowan drove on, considering. 7 years he'd spent alone. 7 years of silence and solitude. Part of him wanted to go back to that, to the simplicity of just surviving. But another part, the part that had pulled Sarah from that creek, that had fought for her, stood beside her, that part wanted something different. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay? Yeah, let's build something." Sarah's smile was bright enough to hurt. "Just like that?" "Just like that." They drove back toward the mountains, leaving Denver and its crowds behind. The valley stretched below them, changed now, emptier. But not dead, just different. And somewhere between the valley and the mountain, between the world that had hurt Sarah and the isolation that had sheltered Rowan, there was space for something new. Something built not on power or fear, but on the simple truth that everyone deserved to be safe, that everyone deserved to be believed, that justice, however slow and imperfect, was worth fighting for. The truck climbed higher, and behind them Copper Valley began its long, painful process of becoming something better than it had been. Or maybe just different. Either way, it would never be the same. And that, Sarah thought, watching the landscape roll past, was exactly the point. 6 months after the verdict, Sarah stood in an empty field halfway between the valley and the mountain, watching the first foundation posts go into the ground. The land had cost almost nothing. Nobody wanted property associated with what the newspapers were now calling the Copper Valley case. But Sarah saw potential where others saw shame. Rowan worked alongside 3 other men, measuring distances, checking levels. He'd shaved his beard down to stubble, cut his hair. Still looked uncomfortable around people, but he was trying. "You sure about this location?" he called over. "Winter's going to be rough. Wind comes straight through this gap." "That's why we're building windbreaks," Sarah replied, pointing to where saplings had been planted in rows. "Give them 2 years, they'll block most of it. 2 years is a long time to freeze." "Then we'll freeze. Won't be the first time." One of the other workers, a young man named Tom, whose sister had come forward during the trial with her own story, paused to wipe sweat from his face. "What exactly is this place going to be?" he asked. "I mean, I know you said a shelter, but..." Sarah set down the post-hole diggers she'd been using. "It's going to be a place where people can come when they have nowhere else to go. Women mostly, though we won't turn anyone away. Somewhere safe. No questions asked. No judgment. Like a refuge." Exactly like a refuge. She looked around at the skeletal frame beginning to take shape. "My mother suggested calling it Between Worlds." She said, I lived between two worlds my whole life, Chinese and American, valley and mountain, never quite fitting in either place. So we're building a third world, one where that doesn't matter. Tom nodded slowly. I like that. The work was hard and slow. Money was tight despite the fund that had been established. Sarah worked 2 jobs in Denver, drove up on weekends to help with construction. Rowan had sold his cabin, moved down to a small apartment in a town 20 miles east, worked construction during the week, and donated his labor to the refugee on his days off. They were exhausted all the time, sore, broke. But something was growing here that neither of them could quite name. One evening, as the sun set behind the peaks and the workers packed up for the day, Sarah and Rowan sat on what would eventually be the front porch, sharing a thermos of coffee. You ever regret it? She asked. All of this? Which part? Any of it. Pulling me out of that creek, getting involved, giving up your peace and quiet. Rowan was quiet for a long time, watching the light fade. I regret that it was necessary, that the world's the kind of place where we need refuges at all. But the doing of it? No. I don't regret that. Even though it cost you everything you'd built? I built a prison and called it peace. You gave me an excuse to tear it down. She leaned against his shoulder. They'd grown comfortable with small touches over the months. Nothing romantic, just the easy intimacy of 2 people who'd been through fire together. Sheriff Boone came by yesterday, Sarah said, while you were in town getting supplies. Yeah? What did he want? To tell me he's retiring. Said the trial took too much out of him. His son's taking over as sheriff. Elias is a good man. He is. But Boone also said something else. She paused. He said the valley's dying. Half the businesses are gone. Population's dropped by 1/3. The people who are left are angry and divided. He asked if I felt guilty about that. What'd you tell him? I told him I felt sad, but not guilty. That valley built itself on a lie, and when the lie collapsed, so did everything else. That's not my fault. It's not, Rowan agreed, but I still feel responsible somehow, like I should have found a better way. A way that didn't hurt so many innocent people. There wasn't a better way. You told the truth. What happened after that was on everyone who'd been hiding from it. They sat in silence, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. You know what I've learned? Sarah said eventually. Justice doesn't fix things. It just stops the bleeding. The healing comes after, and it's slow and messy and never complete. That's darker than I expected. I'm a realist now. Trauma does that to you. You're also building a refuge from nothing. That's not realism. That's hope. She smiled. Maybe it's both. Maybe you need both. The refuge opened on a cold November morning, almost exactly a year after Sarah had been pulled from the creek. It wasn't finished. Only 3 rooms were fully completed. The kitchen was still just a frame, and the plumbing worked sporadically. But it was functional. It was safe. And on that first day, 2 women showed up. One was young, maybe 19, with a black eye and a backpack containing everything she owned. She'd heard about the place from a friend of a friend. Didn't give her name, didn't explain what she was running from. Just asked if she could stay. Sarah showed her to one of the completed rooms. Stay as long as you need. No rent. We ask that you help with chores if you're able, but that's it. Why? The girl asked suspiciously. What do you want from me? Nothing, just for you to be safe. The girl started crying. Sarah held her while she sobbed, this stranger who was somehow not a stranger at all. The second woman was older, maybe 45, with 2 children in tow. Her husband had put her in the hospital twice. The 3rd time, she'd finally left. I heard you don't turn people away, she said, children clinging to her legs. Is that true? It's true. Even with kids? Especially with kids. Sarah set them up in the largest room, brought blankets and food. The children were quiet, watchful, too quiet for their age. Sarah recognized that silence, the kind that comes from learning not to make noise. By the end of the first month, they had 6 residents. By Christmas, 10. Word was spreading through networks Sarah hadn't known existed. Shelters in other towns, social workers, churches. Women helping women in quiet, persistent ways. Sarah's mother moved into the refuge permanently, taking over the kitchen despite her age. She cooked massive meals, healing through feeding others. The residents started calling her grandmother Chen. She pretended to dislike it, but Sarah could see her pride. Rowan built furniture, fixed things that broke, and stood guard at night. He didn't talk much to the residents, still uncomfortable with crowds, but they felt safer knowing he was there. A few of the women's ex-husbands or boyfriends showed up looking for trouble. Rowan's presence alone was usually enough to send them away. Once, it wasn't. A man named Derek showed up drunk at 2 a.m, demanding his wife come out. Started throwing rocks at windows, screaming threats. Rowan walked out onto the porch with his rifle. "You're trespassing," he said calmly. "Leave now or I call the sheriff." "That's my wife in there." "Was your wife? She's her own person now, and she doesn't want to see you." Derek pulled a pistol from his jacket. "I'm not leaving without her." The porch light revealed a dozen women standing in the doorway behind Rowan, Sarah in front holding her own pistol. Grandmother Chen beside her with a kitchen knife, the others armed with whatever they'd grabbed, baseball bats, frying pans, scissors. "You're outnumbered," Rowan said, "and if you fire that gun, you won't leave this property alive. Your choice." Derek looked at the wall of determined women, looked at his pistol, looked at Rowan's steady aim. The math wasn't in his favor. He left. Sheriff Elias Boone showed up an hour later, arrested Derek on weapons charges and violating a restraining order. As he was leaving, he pulled Sarah aside. "You can't keep doing this," he said, "taking the law into your own hands. We didn't break any laws. This is private property, and he was threatening us. You know what I mean. Eventually someone's going to get hurt. People were already getting hurt. We're just making it harder." Elias sighed, looked at the refuge, at the women still clustered on the porch. "My father said you'd change things. Guess he was right." "Is that a problem?" "No, but change makes people nervous. Be careful." The refuge existed in a strange space, not quite legal, not quite illegal. Zoning laws didn't quite cover it. Tax status was complicated. Some officials wanted to shut it down, cited code violations and safety concerns. Others quietly supported it, looked the other way when paperwork wasn't quite right. Sarah learned to navigate bureaucracy the way she'd once navigated cleaning hotel rooms, quietly, efficiently, making herself useful enough that people didn't look too closely. By the second year, they'd helped 32 women and 15 children. Some stayed a few days, others stayed months. A few never really left, just moved from resident to volunteer to staff. One of those was the girl who'd shown up on opening day with the black eye. Her name was Rachel, and she'd stayed 6 months before finally feeling safe enough to venture back into the world. Got a job at a grocery store in the next town over. Started taking night classes at the community college. Then she came back and asked if she could volunteer on weekends. "Why?" Sarah asked. "You're free. You don't owe us anything." "I know, but someone helped me when I needed it. Now I want to help someone else." That became the pattern. Women who'd stayed at the refuge, healed, and moved on would return to help the next wave. A cycle of survival and support that sustained itself. But it wasn't all success stories. Some women went back to their abusers. Some struggled with addiction or mental illness beyond what the refuge could handle. One woman died of an overdose in her room. Sarah found her in the morning, blue and cold. That death nearly broke her. She sat in her office, a converted storage room with a desk and filing cabinet, and stared at the wall, thinking about giving up, about how maybe this was too hard, too heavy, too much responsibility. Rowan found her there at midnight. "You okay?" he asked. "No." He sat in the other chair, waited. "Her name was Michelle," Sarah said. "She had 2 kids. They're with her sister now. She'd been clean for 3 months. 3 months, and then, it's not your fault. I know that. Logically, I know that. But it still feels like I failed her. You gave her a safe place. Whatever else happened, you gave her that. It wasn't enough. It never is. But it's still worth doing." Sarah looked at him. "How do you keep going? After everything you've seen, everything you've done, how do you still believe it's worth it?" Rowan thought about it. Because the alternative is going back to that cabin, going back to hiding, And I've learned that hiding doesn't actually protect you from anything. It just makes the world smaller until you disappear into it. He leaned forward. You want to know what I think? I think we're both trying to outrun our pasts by building something better. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but at least we're trying. That's not very comforting. No, but it's honest. They sat together in the small office while the refuge slept around them. Outside, snow was starting to fall, the first of the season. Winter coming again. Sarah thought about that first winter, nearly dying in a creek. Thought about how far she'd come, how much farther she still had to go. I'm not giving up, she said finally. I know. Even when it's hard, even when people die, even when it feels impossible. I know. But I'm also not pretending it's easy. I'm tired of pretending. Then don't. Be tired, be angry, be sad, but keep going anyway. She smiled slightly. You're getting better at this whole talking thing. Don't spread it around. I've got a reputation to maintain. By the third year, the refuge had expanded. 3 more buildings, a playground for children, a garden that provided fresh vegetables in summer. They'd established a network with other shelters, shared resources and information. Sarah had testified before the state legislature about domestic violence funding, had been interviewed by national news outlets. She hated the attention but understood its value. Every interview meant more donations. Every news story meant more women learned the refuge existed. Copper Valley, meanwhile, had found its new normal. The population stabilized, though it never recovered to what it had been. New businesses opened, smaller and more locally owned. The copper mine stayed closed, but a tech company bought the land, talked about redevelopment. The town was still divided about Sarah and what had happened. Some saw her as a hero, others as the woman who destroyed their livelihoods. Most just wanted to move on, to stop talking about it. Sarah visited once, 3 years after the trial. Walked down Main Street with Rowan beside her. People stared. Some crossed the street to avoid her. Others nodded hello. She stopped at the hotel where she used to work. It had new owners now, looked cleaner. A young woman was wiping down the front windows. Sarah recognized her. They'd gone to school together. Hey, Sarah, the woman said cautiously. Hey, Linda. Awkward silence. How have you been? Linda asked finally. Good. Busy. You? Same. Working here now. Management. That's great. More silence. Then Linda set down her cloth, looked Sarah in the eye. What you did, she said quietly, coming forward. That took guts. Thanks. My cousin was one of the women who testified. She never told anyone in the family before that. But after you spoke up, she found the courage. So, thank you. Sarah felt her throat tighten. Tell her she's brave. I will. You too. They walked on, stopped at the cemetery where Sarah's father was buried. She hadn't visited his grave since everything happened. Hey, Dad, she said, kneeling by the headstone. Sorry, it's been a while. Things got complicated. Rowan stood back, giving her privacy. I think you'd be proud of what I'm building, Sarah continued. It's not perfect. Nothing is. But it's good. It's helping people. She traced her father's name carved in stone. You used to tell me that the world was hard for people like us, that we'd always have to work twice as hard to get half as far. And you were right. But you also said that wasn't an excuse to stop trying. The wind moved through the cemetery, rustling leaves. I'm still trying, Dad. Every day. And some days it works and some days it doesn't. But I'm still here. I'm still fighting. She stood, wiped her eyes. I hope that's enough. Rowan walked her back to the truck. As they drove out of town, Sarah looked in the rearview mirror, watching Copper Valley recede behind them. You okay? Rowan asked. Yeah, I think I am. Good. I don't need to come back here, she said. This place doesn't own me anymore. No, it doesn't. They drove back to the refuge where Grandmother Chen was making dinner and Rachel was helping 2 new arrivals get settled, where children played in the yard and women sat on the porch talking, laughing, healing. This was home now. Not the mountain, not the valley. This place in between, built from nothing, sustained by the simple belief that everyone deserved safety and second chances. 5 years after that February night in the creek, Sarah stood at a podium in Denver accepting an award from the governor for her work with domestic violence survivors. The room was full of important people, politicians and activists and journalists. She gave a short speech, thanked the people who'd helped, highlighted the work still to be done. But when it was over and she stepped off the stage, she walked right past the reception and out to where Rowan was waiting in the parking lot. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Fine. Boring. Can we leave?" "Thought you'd never ask." They drove back toward the refuge, windows down, music playing low. Sarah kicked off her heels, put her feet on the dashboard. "You know what I realized in there, she said. "What?" "That all those people, they want to make me into a symbol. The brave survivor who overcame her trauma and built something beautiful. Like it's a fairy tale with a happy ending. And it's not? No, it's messy and hard, and some days I still wake up screaming. Some days I can't get out of bed because the weight of it all is too much. Some days I hate everyone who ever hurt me and everyone who didn't believe me and everyone who just stood by and let it happen." She looked at him. "But those same days, I also love the women who stayed at the refuge and moved on to better lives. I love my mother for standing by me. I love you for being too stubborn to let me die on that mountain." "Love's a strong word," Rowan said, but he was smiling. "Yeah, well, deal with it." They drove on through the twilight, the mountains rising dark against the sky. Sarah thought about how many times she'd looked at those mountains and seen different things. First as the place that almost killed her, then as sanctuary. Now as just mountains, beautiful and indifferent, existing regardless of human drama. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Are you happy?" Rowan thought about it. "I don't know if happy's the right word, but I'm not hiding anymore. I'm living. That's something. That's more than something. That's everything." "You happy?" Sarah considered. "I'm content. Not all the time, but more often than not. And on the days I'm not, I know it'll pass. That's new for me. That's healing." "Is it? I thought healing meant forgetting, moving on completely." "No. Healing means learning to live with what happened, carrying it without letting it carry you." She nodded slowly. "Then yeah, I guess I'm healing." The refuge came into view as they crested the last hill. Lights in the windows, smoke from the chimney. A few residents sat on the porch in the cool evening air. This imperfect place, built by imperfect people, doing imperfect good. It would never be enough. Would never solve domestic violence or erase trauma or fix all the broken systems that allowed people to hurt each other. But it was something. A small light in the darkness. A choice to build instead of destroy. To hope instead of despair. Sarah and Rowan pulled into the driveway, were immediately surrounded by children wanting to show them drawings, tell them stories, demand attention. Grandmother Chen appeared in the doorway. "Dinner in 10 minutes. Wash your hands." The organized chaos of the refuge swallowed them both. There were forms to sign, a leaky faucet to fix, a new resident to welcome, a donor to call and thank. The work never ended. But as Sarah helped set the table, listening to the sounds of life filling the refuge, laughter and conversation, and the clatter of dishes, she realized something. She wasn't defined by what had been done to her anymore. Wasn't just a victim or a survivor or a symbol. She was Sarah Chen, flawed and scarred and still fighting, builder of refuges, teller of truth, woman who'd asked the mountain to take her and then changed her mind. And that was enough. Rowan caught her eye across the crowded kitchen, raised an eyebrow. She smiled back. They didn't need words anymore, had moved beyond them into something deeper. Not romance, though maybe that would come someday, or maybe it wouldn't. It didn't matter. What mattered was this. Two broken people who'd chosen to build something together, who'd learned that justice wasn't a destination, but a practice. That healing wasn't forgetting, but integrating. That hope wasn't naivety, but defiance. Dinner was loud and chaotic. Someone spilled milk. A child cried over vegetables. Rachel told a joke that made everyone groan. Grandmother Chen scolded someone for not eating enough. Normal. Beautifully, perfectly normal. After dinner, after the dishes were done and the children put to bed and the residents settled in for the night, Sarah walked out to the porch alone. The mountain loomed in the darkness, invisible but felt. She thought about the woman who'd stumbled through those trees broken and desperate, thought about how small she'd felt, how powerless. That woman was gone now. Or maybe she wasn't gone. Maybe she'd just grown, expanded to include rage and strength and purpose alongside the fear and pain. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to the mountain, "for not taking me, for giving me one more chance." The mountain didn't answer. Mountains never do. But somewhere in its shadow, a creek still ran, and Sarah was still here, still breathing, still fighting, still building. And that, she thought, as she turned to go back inside, was the whole point. The world didn't owe anyone a happy ending, didn't guarantee justice or healing or peace, but it offered chances. Brief moments where you could choose to keep going instead of giving up, where you could pull someone from a creek or speak a truth or build a refuge from nothing. Those choices didn't fix everything, but they mattered. And in the end, maybe that was all anyone could ask for, the chance to matter, to make a difference in one life, one moment, one small act of defiance against the darkness. Sarah Chen had taken that chance. Rowan Hale had taken that chance, and because they had, 32 women and 15 children had gotten chances too. The math didn't balance, never would. For every person helped, 100 more still suffered. But somewhere, someone was making it through one more night because a refuge existed, because a woman had refused to stay silent, because a mountain man had asked one simple question: who did this to you? And sometimes, in a world as broken as this one, that was the closest thing to victory anyone got. Inside, Grandmother Chen was making tea. Rachel was reading to one of the children. A new resident sat alone in the corner, still afraid, still uncertain. Sarah sat beside her, didn't push, just sat in quiet company. "It gets better," Sarah said eventually. "Not all at once, not every day, but it gets better." "You promise?" "No, but I've been where you are, and I'm still here. That has to count for something." The woman nodded, not quite believing, but wanting to. They sat together in the warm light of the refuge while outside, the mountain stood watch. Silent and ancient and indifferent to human suffering or salvation. But between the valley and the mountain, in the space that Sarah and Rowan had carved out, something different existed. Not perfect, not permanent, but real. And that would have to be enough.